Design thinking is not a very good way to organize the development process. It is a series of mindsets. It's a really great way of kind of breaking sets and thinking of things differently. But it doesn't really tell you what to do first, second, third, fourth. It's not that kind of a thing. The speed of development process, of course, continues to go faster and faster and faster. And in the ecosystem of Silicon Valley, we see companies, forming almost overnight. These layers of product development that I'm going to talk about keep collapsing. When I got out of school, I had a job at a large semiconductor company. We were making high vacuum valves for semiconductor industry processing equipment. I was the engineer, so I would do a sketch. I would hand it to the drafting supervisor, who would assign it to someone in the drafting pool, who would make a drawing, bring it back to me. I would correct the drawing. They would correct that. Then they would hand it to the lead at the prototyping shop. He would assign it to someone. They would build a prototype. And about 6 weeks later, I'd get the thing I had designed. None of those professions exist anymore, and I get the thing I designed by pushing a button, going to lunch, and picking it up off the 3D printer now. So this is incredible change. Developing hardware has never been easier. The platforms are all over the place. The rapid prototyping, additive manufacturing. It's not just a disruption in the way we make things. It's a disruption in the way we work. And software, of course, is becoming much more modular. And then this social media thing, which your kids spend too much time on probably. But if you look at it from a business advantage, it's the most powerful way we have of a direct connection to customers. And if you don't change, I think you're going to fall behind. If you have some sort of linear product development process like this, I think you're dead. And it's difficult because bureaucracies protect processes, among other things. But what happens in almost every industry that we look at is when the rate of change in the market is faster than the product development cycle. And this happened in the PC industry. When I was at the PC industry, started out. It took you about 1.5 years, 2 years to develop a new PC, but we only launched PCs every 2-3 years, and that was fine. And then when that cycle collapsed to 9 months, the people who were still taking 2 years to develop a PC went out of business. In many industries, those cycles, now those product cycles are weeks and days, certainly in the software industry. And in other industries, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. So if you're in a situation where your product development process takes anything other than, X percentage of the product cycle in the market, you fall farther and farther behind, and eventually you lose your position.
42% of consumer devices fail. 87% of devices that have anything to do with human factors fails. This is what we do. That's a consumer device that is worn on your head. But we've been doing it for 56 years. So we struggle with those challenges every day, but we're doing something right. A couple years ago, we looked at our organization and we said, we're not innovating fast enough. And we took our product management group, which traditional product management, we owned products, we owned running the businesses, we were kind of mini CEOs of our categories. And when we looked at it at face value, we said, God, we're spending a lot of time fighting fires. We're spending a lot of time actually looking at the products that are already in market, addressing customer complaints, doing iterative changes to address those complaints, but we weren't going fast enough on the game-changing stuff. So we actually took our group and we split it in half. And now what we have is product experience managers and product business managers. I'm blessed with actually getting to run the product experience managers on the enterprise side. What does that mean? It means I get to wake up every day with my team and not have to worry about the urgent. I don't have to worry about the firefight with USAA when their headset broke in their contact center. I got a whole other team that can focus on that. But it also comes with a ton of pressure, because what are we asked to do then? We're asked to go understand the customer in such deep ways that we can actually solve impactful, meaningful problems so that we actually build objects of desire.
Planning is one of the most important cognitive capacities that we have. as human beings. Imagine if we couldn't plan. It's actually as close to magic as we can get as human beings, to be able to sequence and organize thoughts in the future before we take action. And certainly in the semiconductor industry, that's extremely important. As Steve mentioned, right now, semiconductors, surpass over 1 billion transistors on a die that fits on the tip of your finger. Now imagine that. And some, by the way, into the tens of billions, up to 30 billion and beyond. So these become very complex. But what does that mean? So, you know, it sounds exciting, billions, that's a big number. But what it means is the amount of functionality that you can get on a little piece of silicon is growing exponentially. So the capabilities, the tricorder of Star Trek is really coming to life because of this phenomenon. The other phenomenon and backdrop that I wanted to explain is the fact that, in fact, semiconductor chips, this is, you know, I'm going to tell you a secret. They're actually software products pretending to be semiconductor chips, because in terms of investment, about 50% is software. And in terms of personnel, that number is more like 55% and higher. So there's really a tremendous amount of software that's going into these devices because of the embedded processors and because of the memory. These are computers on chips, and it's really changing the dynamics and the permutations of these products. And then also, you know, listening to these discussions around, you know, being able to create products in a matter of weeks, it's still taken us about 2 years. But the permutations and the demands from the market are, of course, much, much shorter. So that, in my view, is the fundamental challenge for semiconductors and semiconductor markets. Why? It's kind of like shooting clay pigeons, right? You got to anticipate where the clay pigeon is going to be in order to hit it. But, you know, the market doesn't move like a clay pigeon. It's erratic. And here you are, as Steve mentioned, it's $50 million to make these systems on a chip, right? Imagine if you get it wrong. And the other problem with semiconductors, as you move through their life cycle, they become hardened and harder to change. And so it's very hard to iterate on them. You have to get that right.
We were at a crossroads back in 2013 and early 2014 as to you know, how successful would be a new Tier 4 locomotive. We'd done all this great engineering work to design it without after treatment. But going into 2015, when the new regulations were going to hit, we didn't have much of an order book for it. In fact, we only had one customer that had 39 units that they wanted to order. This was due to a varying things. One, their demand was down. And then secondly, like I said, they were looking at this very warily, one, with the additional cost, but two, potentially with the infancy reliability issues that I had mentioned before. And so a lot of them were actually telling us that, you know, hey, we're not going to buy. You know, here's some of the reasons why. We're seeing a weaker demand, and we actually think we can take off from buying locomotives until something like 2017, 2018. The other thing that's kind of maybe, I don't know about unique, but interesting about our industry is really it's in the North American locomotive market, it's GE or it's EMD, which is owned by Caterpillar. And you know, they also took this to heart, and from what we can tell, didn't accelerate. They're trying to get their product to market as well because they saw this going on. And so we asked ourselves, you know, how much do we continue to invest in this? Do we fund other things like liquefied natural gas that I had mentioned earlier, which had a better business case profile associated with it if you could make Tier 4 with it due to the fact that natural gas was so much cheaper than diesel at the time. But we knew that it wasn't going to be Tier 4, that option, and you know, we said, hey, we're GE. How can we not be here for our customers? If they come back a year from now and say we need locomotives, there's not going to be anybody there for them. So we pressed on and we soldiered on, and it was a very unique situation that happened in 2014.